Test 1, 2.
Oh, okay, so we're ready to go again now. Apologies for that. Can we have one meeting, please, down the end there? Thank you. John, just if you could start again then, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in terms of Section 106 and contributions, a consideration we have in this case is viability. So being a brownfield site does come with it some complications in terms of things like contamination of land, there's the demolition to do. So there will invariably be less money in the scheme than, say, a greenfield development where in some instances the land will be purchased at agricultural value. That being said, as I said, viability reviews have been undertaken. They have been independently assessed. The current figure that we're at is 238,000, and that is the surplus available in the scheme to go towards contributions. As I've said, for a further review, it appears there may be scope to increase that, but at the very minimum at the moment, we have that 238,000 secured. In terms of what that money goes to, the projects identified were identified by a development team, but the Section 106 agreement hasn't been drafted yet. It's not set in stone. So if members had certain areas they felt particularly strongly about, we could look at that area of the scheme. I'd say the one area where there probably isn't room for sort of change is that NHS contribution, 39,900, because we would require that to mitigate impact of primary care services. So that is, my understanding is it's GP floor space. They're looking at the current floor space available and potential deficits. As I say, if members feel particularly strongly about something or an area of spend, after that NHS contribution of 39,900, we could then look to prioritise something different in a different order. And then in the event, as I outlined, that there's a possibility there may be more money in the scheme, we could then also look at priorities of any additional monies that come forward. Another consideration in terms of affordable housing is that in this case, vacant building credit applies. So effectively that offsets, so our standard policy requirement is 30%. Effectively what it means is the commercial floor area that's currently there is offset against the affordable housing contributions. So it's been calculated that the maximum we could request in that policy context is 13.62% affordable housing, which is calculated as an equivalent payment in lieu, if it was to do payment in lieu, of 331,953. So that is the upper ceiling. As I say, that could be prioritised if members felt particularly strongly on that, after the NHS contribution, of course. In terms of height and design, it's acknowledged it's taller than the other buildings in the immediate vicinity, arguably reflects more the development in the wider Hawkins Road area. It is important to note that the building is set, or the blocks are set quite well back into the site. That allows effectively a landscape buffer. There's a fair separation between the blocks and the street, and it's not considered that they'll be overly imposing or harmful in the street scene. It is quite a generously proportioned site, and it is considered as a site that can accommodate a taller, effectively landmark building with the appropriate design. In terms of the urban design officer's comments, my understanding is that the reference to discordant is considered in respect of the scale of the scheme, notwithstanding that I think if we're going to deliver something here, it will have to be at some scale to simply be viable and simply to be deliverable. But notwithstanding that, in the Urban Design Officer's wider response, which is outlined in the committee report, he does note a number of positives of the scheme, the improvements that have been made, about how the building has strong visual rhythm, visually articulates the building's massing well. Things like the finer details and architectural detailing appear appropriate. We can also condition that for security and certainty. And just to read verbatim a sentence from the Urban Design Officer, the proposal brings a prominent underutilised site back into active use and adopts an innovative approach to accommodating a mixture of land uses. And the Urban Design Officer also notes the potential or the anticipated positive impacts on the street scene and the support that that will give to the wider regeneration of the area. The Civic Society, in their comments in the committee report, they were the most recent comments received from the Civic Society, but they were, if I have the date somewhere here, they were dated 1st of March 2022. So since that time, there has been revisions to the scheme, and that includes, in terms of the internal floor area, I can confirm that all units comply with nationally described space standards, and officers also consider that all units have acceptable levels of light and outlook, taking into account the windows proposed. There is communal amenity space proposed on that podium deck, which is probably the most usable area, and then there's also the additional area to the northeast of the site, and that is in addition to balconies, with the units being served by balconies. So in such an urban location, officers do consider the amenity provisions are good in that sense. Flooding, it's considered flooding is suitably addressed by the resilience measures proposed. Essex, in their role as lead local flood authority, have no objection subject to conditions. The same is true for the Environment Agency. In terms of public benefits of the scheme, it's considered an important public benefit that shouldn't be overlooked is the positive impact it is going to have to the street scene and that part of the Hive. It will bring active frontages to that site, which currently is not attractive. It will provide that overlooking in a positive way, which will hopefully, with that increased footfall, really assist in regenerating and rejuvenating that area. And officers consider that is a significant public benefit that is worth noting. Hopefully that covered everything, but more than happy to come back in if I missed anything. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. Colleagues, any comments? You put your hand up, please. Councillor Tate, please.
Well, I find myself in the unsettling position of agreeing pretty much totally with Councillor Young. I would like to see what we can do about anything we can do about affordable housing. I'm all for. I agree that it's an improvement on the current situation. I've got a couple of concerns, which will be whatever we do, it's going to be the case, because there is, there needs to be some properties there, but I'm with Tim, Councillor Young, that they could be more sympathetic. But Greenstead Roundabout, as any of you who travel that way, as I do morning and night, will tell you that it's horrendous, and I do not have a very happy heart at the thought of 65 cars on there every morning. But yeah, for me, it's mainly I would like to see what we can do, if anything, about affordable housing, please.
John, I know you went through, but just to clarify the affordable housing situation.
Yeah. So what we could formally say, the current surplus identified in the committee report is the 238,639, which is the calculated surplus. The NHS requested 39,900. So if we set that and say that is absolutely necessary, that is a non-negotiable because of what it's going towards mitigating. Under the current surplus identified, that would leave £198,739, which could, if members are so inclined, be secured and set aside to affordable housing contributions in the city and in the wider area. What we could do, as I say, because it is anticipated, there may be scope to bring the contribution figure up. If that is still the first priority of members, we could say that up to the maximum £331,953 of affordable housing payment in lieu would be effectively the first beneficiary of any additional uplift in the viability. And then after that, we could delegate to officers to identify appropriate projects, areas for spend, ensuring it's still compliant. We could even look at potentially having sort of local public open space projects if that is also something that that members feel particularly strongly too. So I'd say, yeah, so we could set the NHS, the affordable housing up to that 331,953, and then officer delegation to effectively secure the maximum financial contributions we can, but no less than what is outlined in the committee report at this stage.
Simon.
Thank you, members. Yes, if members were so inclined, we could agree to enter into discussions with Ward Councillor Tim Young to agree the spend of any surplus found or identified for the scheme to include obviously additional spend on affordable homes and potentially environmental projects down at the Hyde.
I think that should be all three ward councillors to save any internal disagreements. I know Tim is the group whip, but he'll be whipping himself, and we don't want to get into that, do we, Tim? No. Lee, are you happy with that?
No, sorry, I don't think I explained my question very well. I meant with regards to capacity for affordable housing on the site itself, not money for... Absolutely,
yes, that can be included in the discussions with the developer. So the payment in lieu is 331,953. The maximum affordable housing contribution we could ask on site would be 13.62%, so we'll have to work out whatever that would equate to. But if members are happy for officers to have delegated authority to go back to the developers and negotiate on their behalf, we will look to secure, in the first instance wherever possible on site. I think the other point I didn't touch upon was highways and parking. There was about capacity issues. I think it is one of the it's potentially one of the most sustainable locations you will get. It's right next to the Tesco's, it's right next to the train station. As I said, there are really significant and good cycle parking provisions in here, both covered and for visitor parking. I know we don't live in an ideal world, I'm sure some people will still drive, but in terms of opportunity and choice to use sustainable transport methods, this scheme really is considered to deliver on those options. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Any other comments to make, or are we ready? Martin, Councillor Warnes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to try and get some clarification on some of the points my colleague, the local ward councillor, has made. Can you tell me what the elements are that are contrary to the national and local planning policies that Councillor Young referred to? And can you confirm that NHS contribution for primary care is basically general practitioner care as opposed to money going in to the local hospital? And whilst I do agree that we need to try and leverage as much affordable housing as we can, if I understand you correctly, you're saying maximum 13.46 of the number of properties. So that's approximately 8 to 9 properties. And have, if there was scope in terms of viability to leverage that upwards, what would a development look like? Are you talking about higher density and therefore height? And I'm not sure that's something, given the local members' comments about it being an overbearing structure, whether going up in height, which you do see if you go to places like places that have got rail stations close by, i.e. Chelmsford is an example, you do see higher build, and yes, the plus is that might leverage in more affordable housing. The minus is that you have to balance that against the local members' comments that what's already being proposed is actually overbearing. So if we could leverage that, or rather think in the round and the balance on that, and I agree with Councillor Tate that we need to try and leverage that on site, even though it might be 8 properties. It's a highly sustainable location. If you was to put a low-income family there, all of the amenities are very accessible. There are employment opportunities, etc., etc. So it would, in my view, be sensible to try and get to secure on-site affordable housing. and have a wider conversation about whether grey density is acceptable and whether that might yield even more affordable housing.
Thank you. Yes, so officers aren't proposing, and it's not being put forward, that the scheme will increase in density or size. In terms of securing more contributions, that is working within the existing scheme. Officers, and it appears there may be scope to increase the amount of contributions we can secure from the existing schemes. We're not suggesting it gets any taller, it gets any bigger, or the density increases, but this is potentially additional monies above that identified in the officers' report already. The 13.62% of affordable housing, notwithstanding viability, that's not something we could request more than, because as I mentioned earlier, the vacant building credit dictates that we effectively have to give the developer a degree of credit, because it is set by policy with regard to the brownfield site and the floor areas there. But yeah, as I said, officers certainly are more than happy. We can go away and negotiate to secure up to that maximum amount, or as close to it as we can get, with due regard to viability and the reviews in that regard. But it's certainly something officers are more than happy to negotiate on. I think in terms of the overbearing, just touched upon, as I said, it is set quite well back from the highway. There is that detailed daylight and sunlight report, and it is considered that provides us with sufficient certainty and security. There won't be materially adverse impact to neighbouring amenity in terms of light or outlook. Just remember, apologies, the other point was the design and what element of it is considered contrary to policy. So the Urban Design Officer's full response is outlined in the committee report. I'd propose it is quite positive in general terms. He identifies a lot of positive features. Where it has been identified that the scheme is arguably discordant with the immediate context is in terms of the scale, and it is recognised that the building is proposed to be taller than the buildings in the immediate vicinity. Having said that, it's not considered that is reason necessarily to preclude a development that is taller, particularly when it's quite a well-proportioned site. It can be set quite well within the site, and it is a corner plot, which it's considered can accommodate something a bit taller, a landmark building with an acceptable quality of design, which this scheme is considered to deliver. Hopefully that answered all of those points, but again, more than happy to come back. Thank you.
Happy, Barton? Councillor Barton.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I do agree with Tim on the affordable housing aspect of it. That does need to be looked at. But basically, we went this afternoon. It's a total eyesore. It's just atrocious. The building wasn't secure. It's obvious people are going in and out. It's a magnet for antisocial behaviour. So to see something actually, a proposition on the table is absolutely good news, and particularly on a brownfield site. So I very much liked it from that point of view. I also like the underground parking. I think that's a real innovation, the way it's been designed, so that it does give you some public space above it. I think that's quite clever, actually. And it was in a really sustainable location. It's superb to see the station one side, Disco the other. So, to be honest, I want to propose that we accept the officer recommendation. I think it's a good project, and that area does need that development. Thank you. Oh, one point though, can you just confirm that those mature trees on the front will be retained, please, because they make quite a difference to that. Thank you.
Yeah, they're really important landscape streetscape features. They're not within the ownership of the applicant. It's believed they are under the ownership of the Highway Authority, but this proposal does not propose removing them, or it wouldn't anticipate to be necessary to prune them in any way. And there is also a specific tree protection condition to ensure that, say, any groundworks, any digging, any storage of material takes place in a manner that isn't harmful to those trees and the amenity they provide. Thank you.
So are you proposing that we accept the application?
I am.
But including in the changes to the 106?
Yes.
Do we want to change anything else? Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wonder where you were going with that, whether you were talking about deferment or delegation. Are you talking about deferment and to come back, or delegation? Because I like what Mr. Miles is telling us here.
It's a Propose to accept the application
Yes.
with the change to the social housing as proposed by Councillor Day.
Could I just, we're going to get all of this, could I just ask about the billboards, the discontinuation of the billboards? Are we in some kind of legal nicety in order to get them removed? Because if we ended up with the situation where we got all we wanted for on the site, and thank goodness Councillor Young came to the evening and poked us in the ribs with this, we can't be in a situation where we have all these wonderful things coming through. I mean, we're stuck with these billboards because of some legal agreement.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the billboards have been there such a length of time that they effectively benefited from deemed consent, but we do have powers under planning legislation that if we consider the advertisement causes a substantial injury to the amenity of the area, we can serve a discontinuance notice, which simply put says they have to be removed. That discontinuance notice has currently been appealed by the people who own the billboards. So there will be an appeal. Ultimately, officers feel confident that there is that substantial injury there. The discontinuance notice is reasonable, justified, and we very much hope that the inspector agreed with that. I think in what officers consider the unlikely scenario that an inspector didn't agree with that, if the scheme were to come forward, that would understandably bring with it a very distinct change of character of the area, and officers are of the view that that injury to the amenity of the area caused by the billboards would only be more substantial if the development did come forward. So we consider that would put us in an even stronger position to secure their removal through a discontinuance notice.
They're in a chicken and egg situation. Okay, thank you very much.
Robert?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I totally agree with affordable on-site provision. I do note, though, that there's 53 two-bedders and there's 12 one-bedders. And forgive me, I think with the amount of social housing in Grinstead, just over the roundabout, that actually perhaps it would be more sustainable to have the one-bedder units for, because we've got 4,000 people on the list. I think generally our housing stock are mostly family houses. And I think, the one beds would be probably more use. So that's just an observation. Depending if there's any 106 left after the social housing provision, I would agree with Councillor Young in that, to put it in Castle Park is ridiculous. I mean, Riverside is slightly closer, but it is true there are no easy access open areas apart from going right over the Grinstead. So that is a shortfall. But on this particular site, which is a regeneration site of mixed use, we will get it's what it is. TPO's been mentioned, but you're confident you don't need to put a TPO on those trees. I know you've said they could be protected, but this council can put TPOs on. The other thing is the boundary brick wall that hasn't been mentioned. It's been shown in all the illustrations. It does need a bit of tidying up, but on the basis that the open space, the usable open space is behind that wall before the buildings. That's actually quite important for those 150 residents. So, and cars. How many charging points did you say? There's 71 spaces and 124 cycle spaces. But forgive me, fires are a significant risk. Are we building in a secure, fireproof car park without damaging the rest of the building, or can we reduce the number of charging units? Again, because it is such a sustainable area with cycles, buses, trains, do we actually need to have all those parking spaces? Is what I question, and certainly all the charging units.
And otherwise, it would look a lot better than what's there now. It is still a commercial area, but with it will lead the way. And I think three to four stories is very reasonable considering the 11 to 12 that we've got elsewhere on the Hive. So thank you, Chairman.
John.
Thank you. Yeah. In terms of any affordable housing provision and the mix of that provision, officers can certainly have any further discussions and negotiations on that matter in collaboration with our affordable housing officer, who will have access to things like the sort of waiting list, and will be able to advise on an appropriate and desirable mix. In terms of the trees, no concern has been raised through application stage about their sort of impending danger or anything. Given their highway, it's believed they're highway trees. It's not considered. There's no apparent reason at the moment that they're under any kind of threat. So that's why it's considered with the imposition of that tree protection condition to ensure that the works on site don't impact them. It's not considered that the development will have any material impact on those trees. Similarly, with the brick boundary wall, so the proposal doesn't include any works to that wall, as far as I'm aware. That's not to say potentially in the future some won't be required, or there won't be a need for further discussions and further work on that. But ultimately, nothing is proposed at that wall to happen to that wall at this time. In terms of parking numbers, EV charging numbers, the plans detail currently 12 EV charging spaces, and it also indicates that when the development is constructed, it's going to be done in a way mindful that there may need to be additional EV parking in the future as electric cars become more popular. In terms of safety, fire safety specifically, Essex Fire Service were consulted, raised no objections, and things like EV charging points, things like fire resistance, that would all be expected to be covered by building regulations. And EV charging isn't at this stage now a new thing, so I'd imagine there are quite strict regulations and building control measures to ensure that effectively they're appropriate for their setting and safe. Thank you.
Councillor Ward, and then we're going to go to the vote.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just wanting a bit of clarification, because the proposal is to accept, but I understood the local member to say current proposals on the table do not offer any affordable housing. So we are reliant on accepting the proposal and asking the officers to try and negotiate affordable housing up to the maximum available. So what guarantee accepting will give us that number of affordable housing? Does actually passing it guarantee that number comes in, or?
Thank you. I think we could specifically word the recommendation such that officers ultimately have delegated powers to negotiate and secure the maximum amount possible. But in terms of certainty, I appreciate members will want some certainty. So given that the figure of 238,639, which we have guaranteed on the table at the moment, we could say that is a certainty. We could say that officers it will be made sure that there is that 39,900 available for the NHS. That remaining 198,739 of the current surplus will be provided for affordable housing, so at a comparative rate on site. So again, that will probably be through consultation with our affordable housing officer. He'll be able to advise on how much, sort of what the market rate is, what the transfer rate is, and we'll be able to advise us how that translates into number of units. That we can include specifically in it. And then I think in addition to that, we can say that we will do what we can to secure any and all uplift in that figure. And we will prioritise it as outlined as and where that money is required. So up to the 331,953 for affordable housing equivalent on-site units. And then in the next instance, we prioritise, I believe members felt strongly about the parks and recreation provisions, and that was local. So we could say that in the event there is additional surplus after those affordable housing contributions, the next thing we look at is the Parks and Recreation's contributions at a ward level and in with discussions with ward members as well in terms of priorities. So then that sets a line. Now that 238639, that is guaranteed, that is secured, we can provide the certainty, and then any and all betterment and uplift above that, officers will do everything we can to secure the maximum possible in line with those priorities outlined. I don't know if Simon has anything more to add, or if that covers.
No, just to reiterate that will be in dialogue with all of the ward councillors. Thank you.
If I might add, there's a lovely green space at Old Heath that we could put some little chess tables up there. I'm sure the councillor, my comrade in the corner, will agree.
No, you won't.
I don't think he will. Okay, we need to put a seconder for Councillor Tate, seconder. So we're all clear and we're all happy with the proposals there. So please raise your hands if you're for the proposal as set out tonight with the conditions imposed.
That is unanimous, Chair.
And with that, that is the conclusion of tonight's meeting. Thanks everybody for turning up.
Thank you.
It's been up and down tonight, but thank you very much for your contribution. Bye.